Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are embarking on, well, what's perhaps our most ambitious mission yet? A full synthesis of human wisdom on happiness.
It's a big one.
Yeah, we're taking thousands of years of philosophy, from the Buddha in India, Confucius in China, the Stoics in the Mediterranean,
Hmm.
and we are putting their central claims about happiness and meaning right alongside the absolute cutting edge of modern psychological and neurological science.
It's a phenomenal undertaking, really,
Mhm.
because the source material here, it comes from research that meticulously went through these classical works, pulled out their core psychological ideas,
Right.
and then actually tested them against current data.
Right.
So the result isn't just some historical exercise.
No, not at all.
We're finding that a lot of these ancient ideas, when you look at them through a modern psychological lens, they provide these, well, stunningly accurate blueprints for human fulfillment. It's quite something.
Absolutely. And to give this whole huge body of knowledge some kind of structure, we really have to start with the foundational metaphor, the one that explains, frankly, almost all our internal conflict and, most of our self-help struggles.
The divided mind.
Exactly. The divided mind. We're talking about the relationship between the conscious, verbal reasonings, let's call that the writer,
Yeah, okay.
and the massive, emotional, intuitive, automatic self, the powerful elephant.
And the crucial thing right off the bat is the power dynamic. It's
Mhm.
not balanced.
It's not even close.
No, the elephant isn't just like a pet the writer controls. It's the engine. It's the power. The writer, our conscious mind, it only has very limited control. It's crucial control, but limited.
Right.
The elephant is usually the one setting the course
Yeah.
based on instincts, emotions, habits,
Mm.
things refined over millennia of evolution.
Okay, let's unpack this metaphor more, because really understanding this dynamic, it fundamentally changes how you approach self-improvement, doesn't it?
Completely. And the concept itself, like you said, it's ancient. Buddha compared the mind to a wild elephant, right? Something that needs daily practice just to gentle it. But now, modern science is giving us the evolutionary reasons, the neural reasons for why this conflict exists in the first place.
Okay, so lay that out.
Exactly. So think of it like this. The elephant that represents all the automatic processes, your intuitions, emotions, gut feelings, habits.
It's stuff that just happens.
Right. And these systems are incredibly old, evolutionarily speaking. They've been perfected over countless generations to keep us alive, basically.
And the writer.
The writer, that's our conscious mind, our language ability, our long-term planning brain. It's like writer version 1.0.
Huh. Beta software.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It's powerful, no doubt, but it's a much more recent evolutionary update. Maybe only really came online in the last couple million years. And, well, it's still working out the bugs.
So we're running this ancient, super refined operating system, the elephant, with this brand new kind of limited, maybe even glitchy piece of planning software, the writer trying to steer it.
That's a great way to put it. And David Hume, the philosopher, he nailed this centuries ago. He said, reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions.
Wow. So the writer doesn't evolve to be the dictator?
No, it seems like it evolved more to serve the elephant, to help the elephant achieve its evolutionary goals better, like, figure out farming for long-term food or navigate complex social groups. It's a smart advisor, not the king.
Okay, that realization itself feels huge. If you understand the goal isn't brute force, like suppressing the elephant.
Which never works long-term.
Right. But it's more about influence and gentle coaxing, then your whole self-improvement strategy has to shift, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You stop trying to win this unwinnable tug of war against something vastly stronger and older than your conscious will.
And what's really fascinating is that this division, this writer-elephant thing, it isn't just a neat metaphor. You can actually see it reflected in the physical structure of our nervous system.
That's right. There are at least 3 distinct physiological divisions that actively create this feeling of internal conflict.
Okay, where do we start?
Well, let's start with the one maybe people feel most intuitively, the division between head and gut.
Ah, the gut feeling.
Exactly. Most people know about the brain and the skull, obviously, but they often overlook the second brain. Your entire intestinal tract, it's lined with over 100 million neurons.
100 million, wow.
Yeah, it's called the enteric nervous system, or the gut brain. It handles all the complex computations for digestion, sure, but it operates with this, well, almost startling degree of autonomy, and it's constantly feeding information and, crucially, emotion back up to the head brain.
It's the autonomy that gets me. I remember reading Montaigne, the essayist, writing way back in the 16th century about how, the bowels sometimes move independently of our wishes.
He was onto something.
He was unknowingly describing the gut brain just doing its thing, bypassing the writer entirely.
That's it. When you feel that gut reaction, or butterflies, or a wave of nausea, that's your elephant's visceral system running a calculation. The writer might not even know why until after the physical feeling has already started.
Okay, so head versus gut. What's next?
Moving inward, the second division is maybe the most psychologically revealing. Left versus right, the two hemispheres of the brain.
And this comes from those split brain studies.
Directly from them. The work of Michael Gazzaniga and others back in the 1960s, treating severe epilepsy by severing the corpus callosum, the main bridge connecting the hemispheres.
Right. Okay, pause here because this stuff really messes with our usual idea of a single, unified consciousness.
It absolutely does. When that connection is cut, patients often seem normal day to day. But in experiments, the lack of communication reveals these stark differences. The left hemisphere, which handles language for most people, that's our writer, it often acts like a professional explainer. Or maybe a spin doctor.
A lawyer, you called it earlier?
The ultimate lawyer, yes. So, for example, Gazzaniga might show the right hemisphere, which can't speak, a written command like walk.
Okay.
The person would stand up and start walking, because the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. But then, if you ask the conscious verbal left hemisphere, hey, why are you getting up? Remember, it didn't see the command. What does it do?
Does it say, I don't know?
Almost never. It instantly confabulates. It makes up a plausible story, like, oh, I felt like getting a drink. It creates a reason on the spot.
So the writer, the left hemisphere, just cannot stand not having an explanation. It will invent one instantly and confidently.
Exactly. The most famous example is probably that chicken claw and shovel experiment.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Okay, so the left eye, connected to the right hemisphere, sees a picture of a chicken claw. The right eye, connected to the speaking left hemisphere, sees a picture of a snow scene.
Okay. Different inputs to each side.
Right. Then the patient is asked to point with each hand to a related picture from a selection. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere that saw the claw, correctly points to a chicken.
Makes sense.
The right hand, controlled by the left hemisphere that saw the snow, correctly points to a shovel.
Also makes sense. Shovel for snow.
But here's the kicker. You ask the patient, relying on their speaking left hemisphere, why did you point to the shovel? Remember, the left brain only saw snow. It didn't see the claw.
So what does it say?
It instantly weaves a story connecting both actions. Oh, that's easy. The chicken claw goes with the chicken, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed.
Whoa! It just made that up to connect the unrelated actions it observed its own body making.
Instantly, confidently, and completely falsely. It shows the writer's default mode isn't truth-seeking. It's narrative construction. It's making sense of what the elephant is already doing or feeling. It's a post hoc rationalizer, a spin doctor.
That is deeply unsettling. Okay, what's the third division?
The third one is new versus old parts of the brain. We kind of grew up with this idea, let's call the Promethean script, this idea that evolution was constantly upgrading us, that the newer parts, like the frontal cortex, were the seat of pure rational control, finally getting a grip on the older, primitive, animalistic limbic system, like reason conquering emotion.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Plato's charioteer taming the wild horses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that script is turning out to be, well, scientifically flawed. The neocortex, especially the part right behind the eyes called the orbitofrontal cortex, the OFC,
Yeah.
that was supposed to be the pinnacle of pure reason. But we now know the OFC is intensely specialized in emotional processing.
Not reason, emotion.
Deeply involved in it. It's not doing abstract philosophy up there. It's doing rapid, moment-to-moment emotional calculus. Sizing up immediate reward versus immediate punishment. Approach or avoid.
So the part we thought was the wise writer steering us towards long-term goals is actually kind of part of the elephant's short-term emotional system, just a very sophisticated part.
That seems to be much closer to the truth. It highlights this fundamental challenge of mental control. Our mental life is split between these vast, parallel, automatic processes, the elephant's world.
Running a million things at once.
Right. And these limited, serial, conscious processes, the writer's world. The writer can only really focus on one thought, one sentence, one problem at a time.
Okay. And that limitation, that explains why just trying to force yourself to do something often fails. It leads us to that ironic process theory, right?
Exactly. Dan Wegner's famous work. If you try hard not to think about something, the classic example is don't think about a white bear.
Right.
What happens?
You immediately think of a white bear.
Right. Because the conscious controlled process sets the goal. No white bear thoughts. But to check if you're succeeding, an automatic monitoring system has to scan your mental landscape for signs of the white bear.
So the monitoring process itself keeps bringing the thought back.
Precisely. And Edgar Allan Poe called this the imp of the perverse, the controlled process, the writer. It gets tired quickly when you're exerting effortful suppression.
Yeah, willpower feels finite.
It does. But the automatic monitoring processes, they're inexhaustible. They just keep running. So they keep introducing the unwanted thought, especially when your conscious control flags.
So that's why staring at the plate of cookies and just gritting your teeth, trying not to want one, is so exhausting and usually fails.
It's a perfect example. The key to real self-control, then, isn't suppression. It's not brute force. It's actually emotional intelligence. The writer has to get skilled at distracting and coaxing the elephant.
Like in those marshmallow studies?
Exactly. Walter Mischel's famous studies. The kids who successfully waited for the second marshmallow, they didn't just stare at the first one and fight the urge.
What did they do?
They were the skilled writers. They found ways to distract their elephants. They looked away, covered their eyes, sang songs, thought about playing later.
They diverted attention.
Yes. They didn't suppress the desire head-on. They redirected the elephant's attention and energy. That's the subtle, sophisticated power the writer actually has. Not brute force, but skillful redirection.
Okay, so we've got this internal picture. The powerful emotional elephant, the often confabulating writer, lawyer trying to make sense of it all. Now let's take that dynamic and look outward. How do we manage to interact with others? How do we get social harmony if we're all run by selfish elephants and spin doctor writers?
Well, the answer lies in probably the single most crucial tool evolution gave us for social life. Reciprocity.
The golden rule, basically. Do unto others.
At its core, yes. Reciprocity is absolutely fundamental. It's the bedrock of social living. You see, human beings evolved what game theorists called the tit-for-tat strategy.
Okay, what's that?
It was a huge evolutionary breakthrough because it allowed us to form stable, cooperative relationships with people we're not related to with non-kin. The strategy is beautifully simple. Cooperate on the first move, be nice initially.
Right.
Then on every subsequent move, just do whatever your partner did last time. If they cooperated, you cooperate. If they defected, you punish them by defecting back. Then you're willing to cooperate again if they switch back.
So it's nice, but also retaliatory, but also forgiving.
Exactly. It allows trust to build, but it protects you from being exploited. It lets us move beyond just trusting family and build these huge, complex, cooperative societies.
And we see this in other animals too, right? Like those vampire bats.
That's a classic example.
Yeah.
Vampire bats, they need to feed on blood regularly, or they die. Sometimes a bat fails to feed. What happens? Another bat will often regurgitate some of its own blood meal to share.
Wow.
But crucially, they're much more likely to share with bats that have shared with them in the past, even if they aren't related. It's a calculated tit-for-tat system keeping the group alive.
And in humans, this reciprocity thing, it's almost like a reflex, isn't it? It can be kind of mindless.
Oh, very much so. Reciprocity reflex. There was that famous study where a social psychologist sent Christmas cards to hundreds of complete strangers he picked randomly from a phone book.
Just sent them a card out of the blue.
Yep. And what happened? A huge number of these strangers felt this powerful, almost unavoidable sense of obligation. And they sent a Christmas card back to him, even though they had no idea who he was.
That's amazing. Just the act of receiving created the urge to repay.
Exactly. And this reflex is so strong it can be exploited, unfortunately. Think about the Hare Krishnas back in the day at airports.
Oh, yeah, with the flowers.
Right. They mastered this. They'd physically press a small gift, a flower, maybe a book, into your hand before they asked for a donation.
Triggering the reflex first.
Precisely. That small, unasked-for initial gift activates the reciprocity reflex. Suddenly you feel socially indebted, awkward, and much more likely to give them a donation just to clear that slate, even though the gift was unsolicited.
But that reflex, even if it's mindless sometimes, it must be crucial for good relationships, right?
Absolutely essential. It's like a necessary tonic. Healthy relationships, friendships, partnerships, they need a constant, balanced give and take. Favors, attention, listening.
And sharing vulnerability, too.
Especially that. Mutual self-disclosure relies heavily on reciprocity. When one person shares something personal and vulnerable, it subtly pressures the other person to match that level of openness. That's how intimacy and trust deepen over time. It's a reciprocal dance.
Okay, so reciprocity is the glue.
Hmm.
But the moment we bring back that writer, the inner lawyer, we run headlong into the less comfortable side of social life.
Yep. The inevitability of hypocrisy.
It's easy to see the speck in your neighbor's eye.
Well, but you miss the giant log in your own. The ancients knew this inside out.
And this is that confabulation mechanism, again, just applied socially.
Exactly. When it comes to moral judgments, it seems to work a lot like aesthetic judgments, like saying if a painting is beautiful or ugly, the feeling comes first, instantly, the gut reaction from the elephant.
Like, that's just wrong.
Right. And then the writer, our inner lawyer, gets tasked with coming up with reasons to justify that feeling after the fact.
There were studies on this, weren't there, using weird moral dilemmas.
Jonathan Haidt and others did brilliant work here. They used scenarios designed to trigger a strong negative feeling, but remove all the usual rational reasons for condemnation.
Like the sibling incest example, it sounds provocative.
It is, but it illustrates the point starkly. The scenario involves adult siblings, Julie and Mark, who decide to try sex once, just out of curiosity. They use double birth control, nobody gets hurt, they both find it emotionally positive, and they keep it a secret.
Okay, so no harm done by typical standards.
Right. But when you ask people, is that morally okay? Most people have an immediate, powerful gut reaction. No, that's wrong. The elephant screams disgust.
But then you ask why it's wrong.
And you systematically take away all the usual reasons. No risk of genetic defects, no coercion, no emotional harm caused. People get stuck. They often end up morally dumbfounded. They'll stutter. They'll say, I know it's wrong. I just can't explain why.
So the feeling is rock solid, but the writer, the reason generator, is exposed as just making stuff up after the fact.
Pretty much. The gut feeling holds firm, but the justifications crumble under scrutiny. And this leads directly into what psychologists call motivated reasoning.
Which is?
It means we don't search for information objectively like a scientist. We search like a lawyer, building a case for a conclusion we already want to believe. We engage in this highly biased, one-sided search for evidence that supports our existing beliefs, our gut feelings, our passions.
Even really smart people do this.
Oh, absolutely. Think of Benjamin Franklin. He was a committed vegetarian as a young man, really principled about it.
Okay.
Until he was on a boat trip, got really hungry, and saw sailors cooking fish. He smelled it, and his elephant wanted it. Then they cut open a big cod, and inside were smaller fish.
Ah.
Instantly, Franklin's writer confabulated a justification. Well, he reasoned, if you eat one another, I don't see why we mayn't eat you. And poof, his vegetarianism ended right there.
His reason didn't seek truth. It served his sudden desire for fish. The writer just backfilled the justification for what the elephant already wanted.
That's motivated reasoning in action. And this self-deception, it goes way beyond fish. It extends deeply into our self-image. It creates the illusion of objectivity.
Also known as the Lake Wobegon effect.
Exactly. After Garrison Keillor's fictional town where all the children are above average, studies consistently show we wildly overestimate our own virtue, our skills, even our lack of bias compared to others.
Like that stat about leadership.
Yeah. Something like 70% of high school students rate themselves as having above-average leadership ability, which is, statistically impossible. Almost nobody thinks they're below average on desirable traits.
So how do we maintain these inflated self-views? How does the writer pull that off?
Well, research by Epley and Dunning showed a couple of clever tricks. First, we unconsciously define ambiguous traits like leadership or generosity or fairness in ways that just happen to flatter our own particular strengths or behaviors.
Ah, so I define good driver based on the things I do well and ignore the things I don't.
You got it. And second, even when we're confronted with clear, objective evidence about how people typically behave, like base rate statistics, showing how often people fail to be generous, we update our predictions about other people.
Okay.
But we steadfastly refuse to update our assessment of ourselves. We think, oh, sure, other people might be selfish, but I'm different. I have special intentions, unseen struggles. I really meant well.
We grant ourselves privileged access to our own mitigating circumstances, but judge others purely on actions.
Exactly. We think we have special information about ourselves that makes the general statistics not apply to us. It's a profound, deep-seated self-deception. And it means that just reading about cognitive biases, like we're doing now, it makes you much better at spotting other people's biases and hypocrisies. But it does almost nothing to cure your own.
Oh, that's depressing. So if we're all trapped in this self-serving bias, how do we ever resolve conflicts, especially in close relationships where you get these cycles of mutual blame and self-righteousness?
It's incredibly difficult. And the source material suggests a very specific mitigation strategy. It's the only reliable way out, but it goes against every instinct of the inner lawyer.
Okay, what is it?
You cannot win by trying to convince the other person they're wrong or by trying to prove your own righteousness. That just activates their inner lawyer, their motivated reasoning, and digs them in deeper.
So you can't attack.
No. The only way out is through deliberate, effortful work on yourself. You have to force your rider to stop defending and instead actively search for at least one small, specific, valid way that you contributed to the conflict, even just 10% of the blame.
That sounds painful, like pulling out a splinter, as the book says.
It feels exactly like that. Your inner lawyer will scream objections. But the trick is, the pain of acknowledging your small part is usually brief, and it's often followed by a sense of relief, even pride, in taking responsibility.
So instead of, you did this wrong, it's more like...
It's internalizing the ability to say something genuine like, you know what, thinking about it, I probably shouldn't have said X, and when I did, I can totally see why you felt Y.
That small admission, that act of humility.
It's the key. It does two things. First, it offers a non-humiliating way out for the other person. It signals that you're not attacking, that it's safe to lower their defenses.
Then second,
It triggers their reciprocity reflex. When you show vulnerability and take some responsibility, it makes it much easier and more likely for them to reciprocate, to perhaps admit their part too. It shifts the whole dynamic from a court battle to potentially a joint problem-solving session. But someone has to take that first difficult step of finding the log in their own eye.
Okay, let's shift back from our social interactions to the sort of baseline disposition of the elephant itself. Even if we manage our relationships well, a lot of people are still fighting this constant internal battle. Why? Because the elephant seems to be caught in the negativity trap.
That's a really good way to put it. For most people, evolution seems to have tuned the elephant to see too many things as potentially bad and not enough things as definitely good. There's a fundamental negativity bias.
Bad is stronger than good.
Yes. Faster, stronger, and more persistent in our minds. And we can actually see the neural wiring for this. It involved the amygdala shortcut.
Okay, break that down.
So every piece of sensory information coming in, sounds, sights, touches it, hits a relay station in the brain called the thalamus first.
Right.
Now, most of that signal takes the high road, the slower route, up to the cortex for detailed processing, for conscious awareness. That's where the rider figures out what's going on.
Okay.
But a small, crucial part of that raw, unprocessed signal takes a shortcut, the low road, directly from the thalamus to the amygdala.
Which is the brain's fear center.
Exactly. It's an ancient alarm system. This shortcut lets the amygdala trigger a rapid fight-or-flight response. A full-body flinch, heart races, muscles tense within the first tenth of a second.
Before you even consciously know what the threat is.
Sometimes, yes. It reacts instantly to crude patterns that might signal danger: a loud bang, a snake-like shape, a sudden looming shadow. The conscious rider is still figuring things out when the elephant has already hit the panic button.
Wow. And is there an equivalent good stuff shortcut?
That's the key point. No. There's no equivalent green alert system for instantly triggering joy or deep pleasure based on raw input. Positive emotions, feelings of happiness, contentment, they generally need the slower cortical route. They take a full second or two to build up as the rider processes the good news.
So we're fundamentally wired for survival, for threat detection, much more strongly than for enjoyment or savoring the good.
It seems that way. Evolution prioritized avoiding sticks over chasing carrots, you could say, which leaves many of us constantly battling this undercurrent of worry, anxiety, and those intrusive negative thoughts. The elephant is just scanning for trouble by default.
And this baseline tendency, this towards negativity or positivity, it varies a lot between people, doesn't it? Which brings us to the maybe uncomfortable reality of the cortical lottery.
Yes. This is where the research gets quite sobering, for the idea that happiness is purely about choices or circumstances. The evidence is pretty strong now that our fundamental affective style, our average mood, our tendency towards positive or negative emotion is significantly heritable.
How heritable?
Twin studies, especially those looking at identical twins separated at birth and raised in totally different environments, suggest that anywhere from 50% to maybe even 80% of the variance in people's average happiness levels can be traced back to their genes.
50 to 80%, that's huge.
It is. It doesn't mean your happiness is fixed, but it means your genetic starting point plays a massive role. You get these incredible stories, like the Giggle twins, identical twin sisters separated at birth, raised apart, who met as adults.
Yeah.
And they discover they shared countless quirky behaviors. But most strikingly, both had this unusually sunny, cheerful, constantly giggling disposition, despite very different life experiences.
So the genes created similar brain structures, leading to a similar default mood.
That's the idea. Genes provide the recipe for the brain, and that brain has a certain baseline setting. Richard Davidson's work really nailed this down by looking at brain activity.
What did he find?
He found that this affective style, this balance between our approach systems, seeking rewards, feeling positive, and our withdrawal systems, avoiding threats, feeling negative, can actually be measured by looking at the asymmetry of activity in the frontal cortex.
Left versus right side.
Exactly. People who consistently show more electrical activity in their left frontal cortex, he calls them cortical lefties, they tend to report more happiness, more optimism, and crucially, when something bad happens, they bounce back emotionally much faster.
And the cortical righties.
People with more activity in the right frontal cortex tend to be significantly more prone to anxiety, depression, fear, and generalized worry. They get stuck in negative states longer. It's like their withdrawal system is just set to be more sensitive, more dominant.
So some people basically lost the cortical lottery. Their brain is just naturally tilted towards negativity.
That seems to be a fair, if blunt, way to summarize a lot of research. For these individuals, achieving sustained happiness can feel like constantly swimming upstream or running through quicksand compared to someone who won the lottery and is naturally buoyant.
Okay, this raises a profound question then. If the elephant's basic disposition, its affective style, is partly hardwired by genes, is there anything the writer can actually do? Can we change our baseline?
Yes, and this is the hopeful part. Even with a strong genetic influence, the brain is plastic. Experience can change it. And the wisdom traditions and modern science have converged on 3 highly effective methods for, let's say, taming the elephant, or perhaps retraining its affective style. They all require practice, but they can lead to real, measurable changes.
Okay, what are they? Give us method 1.
Method 1 is meditation. This is the ancient wisdom piece. What the Buddha discovered 2,500 years ago was essentially a behavioral intervention.
How does it work on the elephant?
Daily practice, especially mindfulness meditation, which involves focused attention often on the breath, allows the rider to do something radical. Just observe the elephant's constant stream of thoughts and feelings without immediately reacting, without getting swept away by them.
So you're not trying to stop the thoughts, just notice them.
Exactly. You practice letting them come and go. Over time, this seems to calm the elephant down. It reduces the frequency and the intensity of those automatic, fearful, negative, grasping thoughts. It gradually dials down the baseline level of anxiety and reactivity. It's like gentling that wild elephant through consistent, patient practice.
Okay, ancient wisdom. Meditation. What's method 2?
Method 2 is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This is modern science's contribution, developed largely by Aaron Beck. It's essentially pure behaviorist shaping, but applied to thought patterns.
How does that work?
CBT targets the negative feedback loops that trap people in depression or anxiety. Beck identified what he called the cognitive triad of negative automatic thoughts. I'm no good, my world is bleak, and my future is hopeless.
Right, those sound familiar for depression.
They do. And CBT works by teaching the writer to become a detective, systematically identifying these automatic negative thoughts as they pop up.
Okay.
And then, crucially, to challenge them, to examine the evidence for and against them, to look for common cognitive distortions like personalization, where you assume everything bad that happens is your fault, or magnification, where you blow setbacks way out of proportion.
So the writer learns to argue back against the elephant's negativity.
Kind of, but it's more subtle.
Yeah.
The real magic seems to be in the daily practice, the homework CBT assigns. Small, manageable tasks. Every time the writer successfully identifies a distortion, challenges a negative thought, or maybe completes a small behavioral task they were avoiding, it provides a little jolt of relief or mastery or pleasure, a tiny reward. The book calls them peanuts for the elephant.
So you're rewarding the elephant for thinking differently or acting differently.
Precisely. These small peanuts reinforce the new, less negative way of thinking or behaving. It's like gradually shaping the elephant's automatic responses away from negativity into the more realistic, balanced view. It's sophisticated training. It takes time, weeks or months, but it can fundamentally shift how the elephant appraises the world.
Okay, meditation and CBT both require practice and effort from the writer. What's method 3?
Method 3 is the shortcut and the most controversial one, cosmetic psychopharmacology. We're talking mainly about SSRI antidepressants, like Prozac or Paxil.
Why controversial?
Well, a couple of big reasons. First, there's the clash with what some call the Protestant work ethic, this deep cultural belief that spiritual or mental gains should be earned through struggle.
Yeah.
No pain, no gain. Taking a pill feels like cheating to some.
Right, the easy way out argument.
Exactly. And second, there's the whole authenticity debate. Peter Kramer wrote about this brilliantly in Listening to Prozac. Some patients didn't just feel less depressed. They felt their personalities changed. Maybe a shy, inhibited person suddenly bloomed, became more assertive, more confident.
And the question is, if a chemical changes your temperament that much, is that really you anymore? Is it a betrayal of your true self?
It's a tricky philosophical question. But let's look at how these drugs might actually work. We know they increase serotonin levels quickly, but the mood benefits often take weeks to appear, 4 to 6 weeks sometimes.
So it's not just the immediate serotonin boost.
Probably not the whole story. One leading theory is that the prolonged increase in serotonin might trigger the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, essentially a neural growth hormone.
And what would that do?
It might help repair or promote new growth in brain areas, like the hippocampus, which can sometimes be slightly shrunk or stressed by chronic worry. High cortisol levels, exactly what you see in people with very negative affective styles, the cortical righties.
So it might be subtly rewiring the brain to be less reactive to stress.
That's one plausible mechanism, which brings us back to that authenticity criticism.
Yeah, let's tackle that. If someone consistently lost the cortical lottery, if their brain chemistry just makes them naturally anxious and pessimistic, is it really more authentic for them to just suffer with that?
I tend to agree with the view that for many people it's not. The analogy used in the source material, which I think is helpful, is thinking of SSRIs like contact lenses for someone with poor but still functional eyesight.
Okay, how so?
The contacts don't change who the person is fundamentally. They just correct a biological deficit, allowing the person to see the world clearly, to navigate it without constant strain and difficulty. For many people who benefit from SSRIs, especially those cortical righties, the drugs don't create a new personality. They remove this constant, low-grade emotional fog or break that's been holding them back.
So it allows their actual personality, minus the crushing weight of anxiety or depression, to finally emerge and function.
Exactly. It helps level the playing field for those who were dealt a tougher neurochemical hand in the cortical lottery. It allows them to worry less, engage more, and maybe see the world as having possibilities, not just threats.
Okay, so let's say we've used meditation or CBT or maybe medication, and we've successfully tamed the elephant's negativity bias. We're feeling pretty good. Are we there yet? Is that the secret to lasting happiness?
If only were that simple. Because even with a well-behaved elephant, we run smack into another fundamental truth about happiness, especially regarding external achievements, the adaptation principle.
Also known as the hedonic treadmill.
Precisely. It turns out we humans are terrible at predicting how happy or unhappy future events will actually make us, and for how long. We consistently overestimate both the intensity and the duration of our emotional reactions.
So both good stuff and bad stuff.
Both. The classic studies here are just stunning. They tracked people over time, including big lottery winners and people who suffered catastrophic accidents, becoming paraplegic or quadriplegic.
Okay, polar opposite against.
You'd think their happiness levels would diverge permanently and dramatically. But what happens? Within about a year, on average, both groups have returned most of the way back to their original baseline levels of happiness.
Wow. So winning the lottery doesn't guarantee lasting bliss, and even a devastating injury doesn't guarantee lasting misery.
For most people, no. We adapt. The new mansion, the big promotion, the weight loss. The initial thrill fades surprisingly quickly as it just becomes the new normal. The elephant stops noticing it.
So this shows that happiness isn't really about achieving a certain level of external success or circumstance.
It's much more sensitive to change, to the rate of change. That's the progress principle. We feel good when we're making progress towards a goal. But once we reach the goal, adaptation kicks in, and the happiness boost often evaporates.
Okay, this sounds a bit bleak. If we adapt to everything good, how can we ever find lasting happiness? Does anything beat the treadmill?
Yes, thankfully. The key insight is that lasting happiness seems to require things from without, things that engage us in ways that resist adaptation.
What kind of thing?
Well, the things most subject to adaptation are often static conditions. Your income level once it's stable, your marital status, where you live. The things that seem to provide more durable boosts to mood are voluntary activities.
Things you actively do.
Right. Things that require effort and engagement, like regular exercise, making time to consistently practice gratitude, performing acts of kindness for others, learning a new skill. These activities seem to provide longer-lasting mood benefits than just passively seeking pleasure, because they often involve ongoing effort, variety, and a sense of progress or connection.
And what about the external conditions? Is there one that really stands out as resisting the treadmill?
Yes, the big one is relationships. Strong, positive social connections. They aren't just nice to have. The evidence suggests they are a fundamental, non-negotiable human need, the need to belong.
And this was proven pretty definitively, if somewhat horrifically, by Harry Harlow's monkey experiments back in the 50s.
Yeah, those experiments were ethically brutal by today's standards, but they were conclusive. Harlow completely overturned the prevailing Freudian and behaviorist ideas that infant attachment was just about getting food, milk from the mother.
What did he show instead?
He gave baby rhesus monkeys a choice between two surrogate mothers. One was made of bare wire but had a bottle providing milk. The other was covered in soft terry cloth but offered no food.
And the babies preferred?
They overwhelmingly preferred the cloth mother. They spent almost all their time clinging to the soft mother for contact comfort, only dashing over to the wire mother briefly when they absolutely had to feed. It proved that the need for touch, for warmth, for a secure base, is innate and arguably stronger than the need for food itself. Separation distress is built into our mammalian hardware.
So attachment is primary. Now, how does that translate to adult love and relationships?
Well, in adult romantic love, we need to distinguish between two different, though related, processes. First, there's passionate love.
That's the initial intense head-over-heels stuff.
Exactly, that wild, exciting, butterflies in the stomach feeling. It's often described as being like a drug, and there's a reason for that. It's heavily fueled by neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine, creating euphoria, obsessive thinking about the beloved.
That's great. What's the catch?
The catch is that by its very neurochemical nature, intense, passionate love has to fade. The brain simply cannot sustain that level of high arousal indefinitely. It develops tolerance, just like with the drug.
Oh.
And this is a huge danger point for many relationships. People mistake the natural, inevitable waning of that initial passionate intensity for falling out of love, for proof that it wasn't true love after all. And that belief often leads to breakups or divorce, searching for that initial high again.
But passionate love isn't the only kind of love, right?
Thankfully, no. It ideally makes way for, or blends with, companionate love. These seem to be related but distinct systems in the brain. Companionate love is that deep affection, trust, intimacy, and commitment that grows slowly over time between partners who reliably care for each other, who support each other, who become each other's secure base.
So it's less about the blaze and more about the warm hearth.
That's a perfect analogy. It's the steady, comforting warmth that can sustain a relationship long after the initial fireworks have died down. It's built on shared history, mutual respect, and the consistent application of our attachment and caregiving systems to each other.
And this need for strong, stable bonds, it's not just about couples, is it? It connects to society as a whole. You mentioned Durkheim earlier.
Yes, Emil Durkheim, the sociologist, did groundbreaking work on suicide back in the late 19th century, and he found something really counterintuitive for our modern sensibilities, which is he found that groups with fewer social constraints, fewer strong bonds, fewer shared rituals and obligations in his time, he noted Protestants tended to have higher suicide rates than Catholics or Jews, who had more tightly knit communities, actually had higher rates of suicide.
So more personal freedom and less social constraint was bad for mental health. That seems backward to us now.
It does. We prize autonomy so highly. But Durkheim's argument was that these strong social bonds, these constraints, these mutual obligations, they provide essential structure, they provide meaning. They embed the individual in a web of relationships that prevents what he called anomie, a sense of normlessness, drift, and despair. The human elephant, it seems, needs to feel securely connected and constrained, to some extent, to thrive.
Okay, so strong relationships are key. But life isn't always smooth. What about bad times? What about suffering? Does that just wreck happiness?
Well, generally speaking, yes, stressors and traumas are bad for us. They cause suffering. But paradoxically, there's also strong evidence that experiencing adversity can, for some people, lead to significant post-traumatic growth, or PTG.
Not just bouncing back resilience, but actually growing beyond where you were before.
Exactly. Using the trauma, the struggle, as a catalyst to reach a new, often wiser or more compassionate level of functioning. It seems to happen when the crisis forces a person to fundamentally reevaluate their life, their priorities, their core beliefs. It forces the different levels of their personality, their basic traits, their coping styles, and their overarching life story to achieve a new kind of coherence.
Is there an example of this?
A historical one often cited is King Ashoka, the ancient Indian emperor. He waged this incredibly brutal war to conquer Kalinga. Thousands died.
Okay.
But the sheer scale of the carnage he caused apparently triggered such profound remorse, such trauma for him, that he had this complete conversion experience. He renounced violence, embraced Buddhism, and dedicated the rest of his reign to peace, tolerance, and public welfare. The trauma forced a total reevaluation and integration of his purpose.
So what are the specific benefits people report from this kind of post-traumatic growth?
Research typically finds three main themes. First, confronting adversity reveals hidden abilities. You survive something you thought would destroy you. This creates a new survivor identity, a sense of strength and competence you didn't know you had. The writer realizes the elephant is tougher than it thought.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Second, adversity often strengthens relationships. Going through tough times together can forge incredibly deep bonds. It also acts as a filter. You find out who your real friends are. And you often develop greater compassion and tolerance for others who are suffering.
Right. Shared struggle builds connection. And the third benefit?
Third, it often leads to a dramatic change in priorities. Like Ashoka, people often shift away from what are sometimes called zero-sum goals, things like chasing status, accumulating wealth, conspicuous consumption of
Things where one person's gain is another's loss.
Right. And they shift towards things like connection generativity, contributing to the next generation, appreciating the present moment, finding meaning in simpler things, serving something larger than the self. The trauma shakes them out of the hedonic treadmill of striving and into a different way of being.
Okay, this whole journey, understanding the writer and elephant, reciprocity, negativity, adaptation, love, growth through adversity, it seems to be leading towards a final, more integrated picture of happiness.
Exactly. It brings us to what the source material calls the final happiness hypothesis. True, deep, enduring happiness isn't something you find directly by pursuing it. Nor is it purely about internal states or external achievements alone. It seems to come from between. It emerges when certain conditions are right, both within you and between you and the world.
What does between mean here?
It refers to getting the relationships right. The relationship between the rider and the elephant achieving internal coherence, and the relationship between the self and something outside the self. This leads to the idea of vital engagement.
Okay, what's that?
Vital engagement is described as this beautiful synthesis of two concepts we've touched on. Flow, that feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity where your skills perfectly match the challenge, losing track of time.
Yeah, being in the zone.
Exactly. Combined with meaning, the subjective sense that what you're doing is significant, that it connects to something larger than yourself, that it has purpose. When flow and meaning come together in a major life activity like work or a core relationship, that's vital engagement. It's often what turns a job into a calling.
And what gives life that sense of meaning or purpose? Is there a single answer?
No, the point is life isn't a puzzle with one right answer. Meaning seems to be found in achieving cross-level coherence. That means getting alignment between the different levels of your existence.
What levels?
The physical level, having your basic needs for safety, food, shelter met. The psychological level, achieving harmony between the rider and the elephant, managing your internal conflicts. And the socio-cultural level, having strong relationships, feeling like you belong, having a role or purpose within your group or community. When these levels align and reinforce each other, that's when life feels coherent and meaningful.
It sounds like we're designed for this alignment.
It seems so. We're fundamentally paradoxical creatures, aren't we? Evolution shaped us through individual selection, making us inherently selfish, competitive, driven to look out for number one.
The selfish scene.
Right. But it also seems to have shaped us through group selection, making us simultaneously hive creatures. We have this deep longing to belong, to connect, to lose ourselves in something larger than our individual selves, to work for the good of the group.
So meaning emerges when we manage that paradox, when we find coherence within ourselves and then connect that coherent self to others, to meaningful work, and maybe to something even larger.
That seems to be the core conclusion. Happiness isn't something you achieve directly by aiming for it. You have to get the conditions right. Coherence among the parts of yourself and the right kinds of relationships between you and other people, between you and your work, and between you and something larger than yourself. Happiness comes from between. #tagoutro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive pulling together ancient wisdom and modern science, it really paints a sophisticated picture, doesn't it? It's not about the writer just overpowering the elephant with brute force willpower.
Not at all. The path to genuine self-improvement, to taming that elephant, seems to be much more about finesse. It's about practiced virtue, like the Stoics taught. It's about acceptance. It's about cognitive reshaping, like CBT. It's about understanding the system, not just fighting it. Ancient wisdom and modern science really do converge here.
And that theme of connection, of relationships, it just keeps coming back as central, especially the idea of contribution.
Oh, the evidence there is overwhelming. When you look at psychological well-being and even physical health and longevity, the act of giving support, being altruistic, volunteering, being generative, seems to be consistently more powerful than receiving support.
So it really is more blessed to give than to receive.
It seems St. Paul was onto something empirically validated. Studies, for instance, looking at older adults, find that those who report providing more instrumental and emotional support to others, friends, family, community, actually tend to live longer and healthier lives than those who report receiving more support.
So volunteering, mentoring, just actively helping others. These aren't just nice things to do. They're powerful antidotes to that hedonic treadmill. They weave us into something meaningful.
Exactly. They create that vital connection, that sense of purpose, that cross-level coherence we were talking about. It embeds your life in a meaningful social tapestry.
Okay, so to close us out, the source material leaves us with a really provocative final thought. It suggests there might be a kind of third dimension to our social and moral world.
Yeah, this is fascinating. We usually think in two dimensions, right? There's the horizontal dimension of closeness. How intimate or distant are we from someone?
Okay, like friend versus stranger.
Right. And there's the vertical dimension of hierarchy, who has more status, power, or authority.
Boss versus employee, leader versus follower.
Exactly. But the argument is that the human mind seems inherently wired to perceive, or at least seek, a third dimension, a vertical dimension, but not of hierarchy, a dimension of divinity, or sacredness, or transcendence.
A movement upwards that isn't about status, but about awe, self-transcendence.
Something like that. Feelings of elevation, moral beauty, connection to something vast, pure, and good. The historian Mircea Eliade argued that much of the modern hyper-rational world has become desacralized. We've kind of flattened reality into just those two dimensions, closeness and hierarchy, into an efficient, profane plane.
And we've lost touch with this third vertical dimension.
Potentially. The analogy used is like the square in Edwin Abbott's book, Flatland. The square lives happily in a two-dimensional world until a sphere from Spaceland passes through his plane. He can only perceive it as a changing circle until the sphere pulls him up into the third dimension. It's terrifying at first, but ultimately mind-expanding.
So the suggestion is that a life lived purely on that flat plane, ignoring this innate human capacity for experiencing awe, sacredness, transcendence, it might remain somehow.
Ugly and unsatisfying is the provocative phrasing used, trapped in the flatness of just competition, hierarchy, and affiliation, closeness, without that upward reach.
So the final thought for you, the listeners, consider this. When do you feel that vertical dimension in your own life? What experiences, people, ideas, or pursuits, maybe in nature, art, music, service, spirituality, deep ethical insight, give you that feeling of elevation, of awe, of being lifted, even momentarily, out of the ordinary?
That pursuit, that openness to experiencing the sacred or the transcendent, in whatever form resonates for you, might just be the most essential and perhaps overlooked work the writer can undertake in cooperation with the elephant, on the path toward a truly deep and meaningful happiness.